teachers! Today's presentation is all about the pros and cons of teaching high school special education and elementary special education. You're in luck because I have actually taught both before, so I am really excited to share all of my experiences with you all. I want to start off by telling you just a little bit about myself and how I ended up here. So the picture on the left is me, and the picture on the right is my three boys. Their names are Riker, Asher, and Paxton. Ever since I was little, I always wanted to be a teacher. It was something that I just knew was going to happen, and I knew in my heart that it was what I was meant to do with the rest of my life. I first became passionate about working with people with disabilities when I joined the first ever inclusive cheerleading team for students with and without disabilities. We were called the Spartan Sparkles, and as you can see in this video here, this experience completely changed my life. A little fun fact about me is that myself and my whole team, we were actually all on the Oprah show, which was pretty amazing. Also, we got to sing on stage with Miley Cyrus during the song The Climb. Here's another little clip of myself and my team here on stage with Miley Cyrus. This was back when Miley was pretty cool and she had just come out as Miley Cyrus instead of just Hannah Montana. Anyways, moving on. Then when I was in college, I decided to start the first ever collegiate inclusive cheerleading team. We were called the UNI Sparkles. This is really just where I found my true passion, which was working with students with special needs. Here's just a couple more pictures of the UNI Sparkles. This was such a fun time, just showing the public how capable people with disabilities truly are, as you all know. After college, I went on to teach high school special education. I mostly taught students with more significant needs. Many of my students had intellectual disabilities. I really loved this job and my students so much. Unfortunately, I found out that we had to move to a different state due to my husband's training. This was seriously really hard on me because, like I said, I loved my students so much. It was just really hard to leave them. We then moved to a completely new state and I taught elementary special education. I had students with learning disabilities and intellectual disabilities. This was a smaller town, so I had a mix of students who had varying disabilities. The old-fashioned term is multi-categorical, aka I taught all types of disabilities, mild, moderate, and severe. Throughout my years as a teacher, I had my first son. Like I said, we lived in a small town for my husband's training, so unfortunately, daycare options were slim picking. Long story short, eventually I had to stop teaching because we could not find a good daycare situation for my son. And here he is, right here, that's little Riker when he was a baby. After a few months of being a stay-at-home mom, I really missed teaching. Like I really missed it. I knew that one of my favorite aspects of being a special education teacher was the creation aspect. I loved creating resources for my students, and it was always a dream of mine to start a TPT store. In May of 2021, I woke up at 4 a.m. and told myself, today is the day. So I went ahead and I started creating and sharing all of my resources with other teachers on TPT. I decided though that that was not enough. I really wanted to make an even bigger difference in the special needs community. I decided to start creating YouTube videos to help other special education teachers with classroom tips, support, and ideas to make teaching and lesson planning easier. I got an overwhelmingly positive response to my YouTube videos, which made me want to continue helping and inspiring other teachers. I brainstormed different ideas on how I could create a free community focused on teachers supporting teachers, and that's when my Facebook support groups were born. Through all of this, I created a company called ActiviTeach. My main goal through ActiviTeach is to help you feel inspired and supported in your journey as a special education teacher. The reason that I'm telling you about all of this is because I want you to know my true dedication and passion towards helping other teachers. So that is why I created this video and presentation for you today. I'm hopeful that through my experiences teaching both high school and elementary special education, that I will be able to help you or help someone make that career move, or maybe just help you feel confident that you chose the correct grade to teach. I know that we all dream and wonder about teaching a different grade, so let's get into it. I want to start this off by telling you to make sure that you you take this video lightheartedly. The reason I say this is because these are my own personal experiences working in 2 different schools. Everyone knows that every single school and every single school district that you work in, you are going to have different experiences. My teaching experiences teaching a certain grade level might be different from your own experiences in that same grade level. Also, a very big factor when you're considering teaching high school or elementary special education is your personality. Because I do feel like some personality types fit better with elementary students and other personalities work better with older students. We're going to start out with talking about the pros of teaching high school. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share with you which grade level I prefer. Do I prefer high school or do I prefer elementary teaching? Keep watching to find out. The number one thing that I really loved about being a high school special education teacher was honestly that I can be brutally honest. And what I mean, in other words, is that I can be real with my students. I have a hard time sugarcoating things, so I just felt like my personality really meshed with my high school students. Another really great thing about teaching high school students is helping them with their life plans after high school. It is seriously the best feeling in the world to help students figure out what they're meant to do in this world or what they're going to do after high school. I also think that I definitely had better relationships with my high school students because I could go so in depth about their life and what they wanted from the future. High schoolers are obviously more mature and they can hold more conversations compared to younger students. As you can probably tell, I like to talk, probably too much. So that is why I kind of felt like my relationships with the high schoolers were better than my relationships with the elementary students, just because we could have those more mature conversations. Another thing that I enjoyed about teaching high school was the students' IEP goals. My students' goals were more based on things that were life skills like budgeting or money and things that they would definitely use in the real world. When I taught elementary, most of the students' goals were more academic focused and basically trying to get students back on grade level, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just love life skills. So as you can imagine, as a high school teacher, a lot of my day was spent teaching life skills and things that were really rewarding in my opinion, because the things I was teaching were things that I knew my students for sure would use in their lives after high school. Another pro to teaching high school special education is that there are defined periods throughout the day. There was a first period and then the bell rang, then there was a second period and the bell rang, and a third period, and so on. When I taught elementary school special education, it was like a whole day rather than defined periods. Every teacher has their own schedules too at the elementary level. I personally thrive on schedules and routines. That is probably why I love teaching kiddos with autism, because a lot of people with autism love schedules and routines just like I do. Anyways, my elementary days were still really planned out, but I just kind of like the feeling of, okay, here's first period, here's what I'm going to teach, now the bell rang, okay, now it's second period, here's what I'm going to teach, and so on. Like I kind of mentioned, I also think that the structure of being in a high school was really great for students with autism and students with any type of disability. Students know, okay, first period I go to math class, second period I go to PE class, third period I go to English class. Another thing that I really enjoyed about teaching high school was that I had the potential to keep a student anywhere from 4 to 6 years, which really gave me the chance to get to know each student and build a great relationship with all of them. It definitely depends on the school that you're teaching at, but when I taught elementary special education, I only taught first grade students with disabilities. So then when they moved on to second grade, I typically would never get to teach them again. Of course, I would still see them in the hallways, but it takes a long time to get to know students. Not getting to teach these students for more than 1 year was a huge disadvantage for not only me, but definitely the students. It takes me literally probably a half of a school year at least to feel like I truly know my students and really figure out how to meet the needs of every single student. So that is why I think keeping students for more than a year is extremely important, in my opinion. One negative side, though, to keeping students for more than a year is, well, what if the student has very challenging behaviors? We all unfortunately know those students who can cause teachers to burn out. Well, the high school that I worked at had a really great system in place for this situation. If a teacher was starting to get burnt out from a specific student, that teacher could talk with the principal, and that student with tough behaviors would go on a different teacher's caseload the following school year. No questions asked. It was a really great system to have in place for special circumstances that I think really benefited the teachers and the students. Like I said, at the elementary school I was at, students switch special education teachers every single year. But, every elementary school is different. At some elementary schools, you might be with the same student for a few years, or you might even be with them their whole elementary career. Every school is different, so keep that in mind. One more pro that comes with teaching high school special education is that typically parents who have students with special needs, by the time their kids are in high school, they've come to the realization that their child truly does have a disability and they've accepted it. High school parents are more realistic also about their child's future. Of course, I'm just talking in general. Of course, there's certain circumstances where maybe they're not realistic, but when you are teaching elementary, sometimes you are the bearer of bad news, and some parents have a really hard time with accepting that their child truly does have a disability. This can be a very difficult time for parents of children with disabilities at the elementary level, which is 100% totally understandable. High school parents are just used to going to IEP meetings and they know what to expect. Next, we will be moving on to the cons of being a high school special education teacher. The number one con, in my opinion, is seriously how busy you are. And yes, it can be very, very overwhelming at times. I personally think teaching high school is so much more work compared to elementary. In one of my Facebook groups for special education teachers, I asked teachers who had taught both elementary and high school which one was more work, and the overwhelming response was that high school teaching is much, much more work, and it is much more time consuming. When I was a high school teacher, I was working all the time. But honestly, it was so rewarding though that it was worth it to me. If you only want to work your contract hours, then this could be a huge con for you. I also felt like I had a lot more responsibility as a high school teacher, especially if you have a work experience program. You have to figure out all the students' schedules of when your students are going to go to work. That takes a lot of time. You also might even have to coordinate where your students are going to go to work. Every high school is different though, but that's just something to think about. Another con is that at the high school level, your IEPs are going to be longer and more work to write. The state that I live in, you have to fill out the transition IEP, which included the living, learning, and working portion of the IEP, where at the elementary level, you don't have to do that. Scheduling issues is another con to teaching high school. Scheduling is difficult no matter what grade you teach, but I found it to be a lot harder to create student schedules at the high school level due to students having to be in a certain class at a certain time and everyone's classes being different. Whereas elementary, you will have 5 students that are in the same elementary class. You can get them all in at the same time. But at the high school level, every student is going to be in a different class, so it can get a little complicated. Also with scheduling, like I said earlier, trying to schedule students into their work experiences and coordinating with businesses around the community is extremely difficult and is an added level of stress that you will not have at the elementary level. Another con when it comes to teaching high school students, but honestly, it might not be a con for everyone. What I am talking about is the teenage hormones and the drama that comes with having adolescent students. There's a lot of drama when it comes to teaching high schoolers. There's a lot of big emotions, so that can be a con. But for some people, it might be a pro because that is where your meaningful relationships come in with your students, and you really build those strong relationships with students when you help them through those hard times. This might sound crazy, but for me, this is actually a pro. I really enjoyed helping my students through the drama. With elementary students, you typically don't have raging hormones that teenagers do, so I could see why a lot of people prefer elementary for this one reason. Another big con to teaching high school is that there might not be a curriculum that is available. When I was teaching high school life skills math, there really wasn't a curriculum. There were some worksheets I could use, but truly I created everything from scratch, and it was very overwhelming. Lucky for you though, I actually created a life skills math curriculum that is available in my TPT shop that I used with my high school students. My TPT shop is called ActiviTeacher if you're interested. Most schools do not provide a curriculum, so this might be a con because it is a lot of work finding materials. Or, it could be a pro because you can teach whatever you want, probably following your state guidelines though. I personally did like the freedom of being able to teach how I wanted and using my own materials, but with freedom does come a lot more work. The next con is the academic gap that students have. At the high school level, I found that students are way more academically further behind, whereas elementary students might only be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 grade levels behind. But I did see at the high school level that the academic gap is definitely growing and is much bigger. Some of my students that were at the high school age, so 9th through 12th grade, some of them were at the preschool level all the way up to the 4th grade level. So that is a really big gap compared to those students at elementary school who might be in 3rd grade, but they're actually at a kindergarten level. That makes it a lot harder to modify gen ed curriculum with students that are at the high school level. So that's kind of why you might have to do your own thing when it comes to teaching your high school students. This next con might be school specific, but a big con, in my opinion, to teaching high school was that I had way more paras. With more paras comes more responsibility, which I don't want that to sound like negative, like, oh, I had more paras. But with every single para that you have, that is another schedule that you have to create. You have to figure out which para is going to work with each student, figure out when the para's breaks are going to be, when their lunches are going to be, and so on. So the more people that you have that you're in charge of, the more responsibility you have. Lastly, my other con to teaching high school is that behaviors can be bigger and potentially more violent because students are bigger. That can definitely be one of the hardest parts of teaching high school. Next, we're going to talk about the pros of teaching elementary school special education. One of the biggest pros that I saw at the elementary level is that you might see a lot more academic growth compared to those students at the high school level. At the high school level, I did feel like students were learning the same thing for a long time. Progress can be small, but at the elementary level, I did notice that the academic growth was easier to see. Another big pro to teaching elementary is that you can mold and shape students at the start of their lives. They're young, and you can help shape and really be a big part of who they become in their lives. That is really pretty awesome, in my opinion. At the high school level, students are who they are, basically, already, if that makes sense. Of course, you can help shape who they become, but their personalities are pretty much already there. The next pro to teaching elementary, I kind of already mentioned this, but there's more curriculum available to students. It is also a lot easier to modify the gen ed curriculum since students might only be academically behind their peers by 1 or 2 grades. Another pro to teaching elementary, which honestly might be a con for some people, but for me it's a pro. You get to work a lot closer with gen ed teachers at the elementary level compared to the high school level. Gen ed high school teachers are pretty into their own subjects that they're teaching, which is totally understandable because that is what they're teaching all day long. Where elementary teachers, you just work very closely with the gen ed teachers to figure out scheduling at the elementary level. You're more like sharing students at the elementary level, and you are more of a supplementary teacher, I guess you could say. At the high school level, I was considered to be the main teacher. Kind of on that same note, one other thing that I want to talk about, which I don't know if is a pro or con, but teacher personalities at the high school versus elementary level are very different. Obviously, I'm generalizing here, and not all teachers fit this description. But from my experiences, elementary teachers are more peppy, they're silly, and they're really fun. I definitely met a lot of fun high school teachers also, but in general, high school teachers seem to be a little bit more serious. And I'm definitely not saying that that's a bad thing. I actually would describe myself as more of a serious kind of person, so I think I meshed better with the other high school teachers, but that might not be the same for you. Also, the different vibes at all of the different levels can vary too. As you can imagine, an elementary school vibe is like more upbeat and colorful. The high school level is, well, more age appropriate for high schoolers. So, again, I'm not sure if that's a pro or con, but you can decide that one for yourself. The next pro is a big one, and I think a lot of people go into teaching just because of this. The pro is that young kids are just cute. They say the most fun and literally the cutest things ever. They bring a smile to your face every single day because they are adorable. Where older kids, they can be cute, but they're just not as cute as young kids. I think you can understand that. Another pro to teaching elementary special education is that I've noticed that there is a lot less frustration with students than there is at the high school level. I think when students are young and fresh into school, they don't truly understand that they are behind academically. Students who would come into my classroom were so excited to come to the special education classroom. The other kiddos who didn't receive special education services were really jealous of those kids who got to come to my classroom. As students get older, it can be more of a negative thing when students come to the special education room because students have figured out that they are behind their peers academically. Of course, coming to the special ed room shouldn't be a negative thing, but over time, society has painted it that way. Since students have figured out that they're behind, that can lead to a lot more frustration. Kids are typically just more excited about school when they're young. One more pro that I noticed when I was teaching elementary school is that gen ed teachers are a lot more willing to modify curriculum and help try to meet the needs of our students in special education. Where high school teachers, I noticed they really didn't help modify my students' work basically at all. This probably was because there was such a huge academic gap, so I get that. Let's move on to the cons of teaching elementary school. One con that I definitely noticed at the elementary level was having to teach students simple rules and repeat myself over and over and over and over again with these rules. And of course, that is whether a student is receiving special education services or doesn't receive special education services. At the elementary level, you're teaching students to follow rules, to line up, to wash their hands, just simple things that I think you need a lot more patience for. Repetition is so important at the elementary level. The next thing that was a big con in my book was the whining. I feel like there was whining all day long, and that was so hard for me because, I have little kids at home that whine a lot. So it was hard to go to school and listen to whining all day and then come home, listen to my own kids whining. That was definitely hard for me, but maybe it doesn't bother some teachers. And of course, that is definitely just a teachable moment. On that note, you really do have to have way more patience at the elementary level. There was definitely a lot more crying at the elementary level too. I saw students crying at least every single day, usually multiple times a day though, let's be real. At the high school level, you would see a kid who is crying for a real emotional reason, where at the elementary level, you have a kid who's crying because someone else has the blue crayon and they wanted the blue crayon. So again, you really just have to have patience. Whenever I tell anyone that I was a special ed teacher, their first response is, "Oh, wow, you must have so much patience." Honestly, though, I would not consider myself to be a patient person. I don't like to admit that, but that is why I felt like I was a great high school teacher. But when I was an elementary teacher, I did see myself running out of patience. Something else that I listed on my cons list for teaching elementary special education is that IEP goals are mainly focused on academic things, like I said before. For example, most of the IEP goals for my students were about the grade level. The goals would look something like this. By the end of the year, the student would be at a first grade reading level, of course in appropriate IEP terms. Rather than at the high school level, the goals were more functional focused. I really enjoyed writing functional goals because they felt more real world to me. And where at the elementary level, it was more standards based, minus like their OT, speech, PT, all of those goals. So that is kind of something that I saw as a negative to teaching elementary. Another con to teaching elementary, which again is the opposite of what I mentioned before, is that some parents truly have not come to terms with their child having a disability, which I can't even imagine. It would be, very, very hard. But that can be tough when you have parents who might not even believe that their child has a disability. IEP meetings with those parents can be very difficult because, of course, at IEP meetings, you're trying to talk to those parents through what reality really is and where their child truly is at academically. I never really saw this at the high school level. Actually, there was one parent at the high school level that had a tough time believing that their child had autism, but for the most part, in general, parents had the time to process and they are on board more with the plan and where their child is at academically when they are at the high school level. So again, the con of teaching elementary is that you might actually be the bearer of bad news to parents that their child has a disability and that they are behind their peers. One more con to teaching elementary special education is that finding time to work with students was very difficult. Like I said before, high schoolers have certain periods throughout the day where they would come to work with me, but at the elementary level, every teacher has different schedules, so you have to figure out when would work best for them. Something that really bugged me, and actually it still bothers me today, was that I didn't feel like there was enough time in the day to be pulling students out of their gen ed classroom. A lot of times I felt like students were being pulled out during times that really they should not have been with me and they should have been with their peers. So that was kind of sad and hard for me because I don't want students to miss out on those fun times in their classroom. Social skills are by far the most important skill that any child can have, in my opinion. A lot of times, my students were pulled out during fun things that they could have been doing with their peers. I absolutely hated that. There just wasn't enough time in the day for the students to get that instruction from their gen ed teacher and their special ed teacher. Now, I want to move on and let you all know what I like teaching the most. High school or elementary, what do you think? First, I want to say to remember that this is my own personal preference, and you really need to take into account your own personality, and every single school is so different. All right, drum roll, please. I absolutely 100% loved being a high school teacher. I loved being a high school special education teacher more than anything else in the whole world. That is truly where my heart lies. I love teaching life skills. I love being able to plan my students' future with them. And I felt like I built the very best relationships with my high schoolers. Again, do not make your decision on what grade level you want to teach just because of my opinion. I just wanted to share my experiences to open your eyes a little bit to teaching different grade levels. Now that I've given you guys my perspective and what I prefer, I also wanted to get other teachers' perspectives. So I decided to make a poll on one of my Facebook groups. I think it was the Special Education Resources Facebook group. And I asked all of the special education teachers, what grade do you prefer to teach? And I gave them 3 options: elementary, middle school, or high school. There were actually 264 people who responded to this poll. And the majority of people chose elementary school. 62% of all of the voters chose elementary school. Then we had middle school and high school, which were tied at 19%. So when I tell you that I absolutely loved teaching high school, I might actually be the minority, which kind of surprised me. I then decided to make another post and I asked teachers why they prefer teaching the grade that they prefer. So I just want to share the responses that really stood out to me. The first comment that I got was this: I was sick all the time when I was an elementary special education teacher. And right away, I was like, how did I forget to add this in my presentation? When I was a high school teacher, which was actually my first teaching job, and usually they say your first teaching job, you are just so sick because you're not used to being around so many people all the time. Well, honestly, I really wasn't that sick when I was a high school special education teacher. But then when I switched to elementary special education teaching, it was just absolutely crazy. I was seriously sick all the time. And it blows my mind that I forgot about this. I actually used all of my sick days my first year of being an elementary special education teacher and some. I can't even remember. I might have had 12 or 15 sick days, but I used probably 20 sick days. And I have a really big problem with feeling guilty whenever I have to take a day off, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. It's really hard having a sub, especially in special education, because offsetting that routine for our students can seriously be disastrous at times. So that year was extremely, extremely hard on me. And another reason that I had to take a lot of sick days was because it was my son's first year in daycare. So he was sick all the time too. So it was a really hard year. But anyways, I think the reason that I really wasn't sick when I was a high school teacher was because by the time that students are in high school, they have learned to cover their mouth when they have to sneeze or cough. And when you're at the elementary level, those students are still learning to cover their mouth and not pick their nose all the time. I got sneezed on so many times when I was an elementary school teacher. So that probably contributed to why I was sick a lot more. I think high schoolers' hygiene is just a lot better than elementary students. To me, that is also a huge, huge con to teaching elementary school, which eventually your immune system probably will get used to it, but that was tough for me. The next thing that someone commented on my post and said was, at the elementary level, I had to come up with lesson plans all day long. At the high school level, I could repeat lessons because I taught multiple of the same classes. So I included this comment because I totally agree with this also. I had to teach a lot of the same students all day long, so I had to come up with lesson plans for basically the entire day. When I was a high school teacher, I mostly taught life skills, math, community skills, and I think I taught social studies also. But I remember that I had 3 or 4 classes that were just life skills math. And my students were at different levels, but I would still use the same lesson plans and just modify them for different grades. So that was a lot easier for coming up with different lesson plans and things to do all day long, every minute of the day. The next comment is, the best part of switching to high school after teaching elementary school was that I no longer had to have recess or lunch duty. That's a good point too. When I was an elementary teacher, I had to go out for recess, and I know some other teachers had to do lunch duty, especially in the winter. Recess duty is not very fun. So it was a lot better when I was a high school teacher and I had none of those responsibilities. At the high school level, you are just able to joke around with your students more. And that's also another big reason why I just loved teaching high school, was because of my relationship with them. And we did have a lot more fun at the high school level too, because you can joke around with them. At the high school level, it is hard to know what your students' background knowledge is. Yes, where I taught at, the students came from all different junior high or middle schools because it was a big district. And, every student has different teachers. So it is a lot harder knowing what your students know and what they don't know, and trying to fill in all of the gaps of all of your different students. Where at the elementary level, if you start with them basically in kindergarten, then you're pretty much starting fresh. Obviously every kid has their own life experiences, but for the most part, they have similar background knowledge, I would say. I love my job as an elementary teacher, but the constant tattling really drives me crazy. When I taught high school, this was never an issue. I actually have the same issue with my older son right now. Tattling can kind of get very, very annoying, so I do see this teacher's perspective. That is why patience is so important at that level, because you will be teaching those simple skills over and over and over again at the elementary level. I got more prep time at the high school level, but I didn't get a lunch of my own because we didn't have enough paras to help in the lunchroom. So I would have to always sit with my students and eat, which was hard because I wanted a break. I thought this was an interesting comment. I also got a lot more prep time at the high school level. I got 2 periods, which were prep periods, which was extremely, extremely helpful. At the elementary level, I can't remember, but maybe about 40 minutes of a prep period. And typically I was doing IEP meetings during that prep period. So a lot of the times I never even got a prep. I'm not sure if it's like that in every district, but that was pretty interesting to me that you would get so much more prep period at the high school level. I think being a high school special ed teacher comes with a lot more work. So I do think every teacher deserves multiple preps in my opinion. But I think for gen ed teachers, Teaching at the high school level is a lot easier than being a gen ed teacher at the elementary level, because at the elementary level, the classroom teachers are, like I said before, prepping and planning for the entire school day. Where high school gen ed teachers, for the most part, they're teaching a lot of the same things throughout the day. They might teach 2, maybe 3 different classes, but I guarantee you they teach that same class more than once in a day. Honestly, I think one of the hardest jobs in the world would be being an elementary gen ed teacher or a classroom teacher, because they have to plan for every second every day. I don't know how they do it. Then the second part to this comment, they didn't have enough paras to help in the lunchroom, so I would have to always sit with my students and eat. I actually had this exact same experience at the high school level. We didn't have enough paras to help in the lunchroom because some students have to have a one-on-one with them all day long, and some students have to have a shared para in the lunchroom or all day long. And paras, they need to eat also, so us teachers would have to go down and eat lunch during our own lunchtime. And this person said it was hard because I wanted a break. I can relate to that, because I did sometimes want to sit in silence and eat. Usually, I'd actually prefer to be getting some of my paperwork done while I'm eating, but I guess that is just a part of being a special education teacher. You have to make sacrifices because finding coverage is hard, whether you're a high school teacher or an elementary teacher. Grading was a little harder at the high school level. I didn't have to make grades for the elementary level. I included this comment because this was exactly true for me too. At the high school level, since you are teaching like a class, I would teach life skills math, I would have to give my students grades. So every assignment would be worth so many points, and tests were worth so many points. Some parents really care about how their students are doing, and some parents don't really care about how their students are doing. When they are in special education, where a lot of their classes are modified, like most of the time they're going to pass as long as they show up, because they are on their own individualized graduation plan. But I do know some of the high school teachers, they would just basically say make it pass or fail, so that they didn't have to grade every single little tiny thing. And at the elementary level, I had the exact same experience. I did not have to make any type of grades. That was up to the classroom teacher. So that was nice too, not having to worry about grades. The next comment was, there is more teacher drama at the elementary level. I saw the same thing as well, unfortunately. When I was a high school teacher, I worked with a lot of men. There were a lot of other men special education teachers and paras, and there was obviously just as many women too, but at the elementary level, there were no men in the whole school. So I don't know if the correlation is working with more women versus more men, or just at the high school level, you could be kind of your own little island being a special education teacher, because most high schools probably don't have multiple special education teachers. My high school just did, because it was such a large high school. When I was an elementary special ed teacher, there was a lot of drama. And at the elementary level, I think that you're working a lot closer with other adults and other teachers too. Student independence is a huge pro to teaching high school compared to elementary. I forgot to include this one on my list also. It is really nice when students are more independent. It's kind of like raising children. When they're young and toddlers, they're very dependent on you. But now one of my kids is 6 years old and he's a lot more independent. It's a lot easier on me. So as he grows and grows and is in high school, hopefully he'll basically be completely independent. It's the same with your students. As they get older, they become more independent, and that does make your life as a teacher a lot easier. A pro to teaching elementary is that my students give me constant compliments. This comment just made me laugh and is so true. I remember when I was an elementary teacher, I had this one girl. She would come into my classroom and the first thing out of her mouth was always a compliment, and it always made me so happy. I always wondered, what's she gonna say she likes about my outfit today, or my hair, or my shoes, or whatever. It was really cute. I think another part to this comment is that elementary students, especially when they're pretty young, like kindergarten, first and second grade, a lot of them can be teachers' pets. They want to suck up to the teacher unknowingly, and they want the teacher to like them. So I think it's really sweet and nice that students at that age are trying to make their teacher feel good or butter them up or whatever they're doing. It's adorable. I love being a high school teacher because it feels like I am always young. I get to always stay up to date on the latest slang and I always get the latest tea, lol. I love that so much. It is seriously really true. As you age, it is true that you aren't usually as cool or know what the latest slang is. But I think if you are a high school teacher, as you age, it would be kind of fun to be up to date on the latest trends and the latest tea, as this commenter said. That was actually something that I also really enjoyed about teaching high school, was being up to date on the latest tea or kind of knowing what drama was going on. It just kind of made my job a little bit more fun, to be honest. We're at the elementary level. There's not really much drama going on. A big pro is getting to watch my high school students in after-school extracurricular activities. I also truly enjoyed this. I had a student that was a wrestler, and it was so much fun to go watch him. And I had quite a few students who did cheerleading. They were on the Sparkles team, like I talked about before. It's always really fun to watch your students outside of school and see them shine. This person said, I'm an elementary special education teacher. I find it adorable that I'm constantly being interrupted with random facts in the middle of a lesson, like it's my student's cat's birthday or their favorite color is clear. That is awesome. This comment also made my day. Yes, all of the fun little random facts that I learned about my students and their families at the elementary level, it was adorable and it was really fun. So I definitely see this teacher's perspective on that. The last comment that I have to share with you guys, this person said, high school students and cell phones. That's all I'm going to say. I think you know what this teacher is saying. When I was a high school teacher, students always had their cell phones out. I was pretty strict about cell phones, so that only lasted about a month. But it can be pretty annoying to be teaching and a student pulls out their cell phone. That really isn't an issue at the elementary level. Elementary students kind of are getting cell phones at a younger and younger age, but high school, it's definitely more of a problem. The last thing that I wanted to say, because a lot of times whenever I talk about comparing high school and elementary school, there's teachers who say, what about middle school or junior high? Well, unfortunately, I have never taught middle school, so that is why I cannot really give advice on it. I actually did teach middle school for my level 3 college experience for 1 week, and I had a lot of fun, but it was only 1 week. I don't feel like I have enough experience teaching middle school to give you advice or even compare high school to middle school or elementary to middle school. So sorry about that. If you were looking for that, maybe in the future I will teach middle school and I'll make a whole new presentation or video. You do what you want to do, become whatever kind of teacher you want to become. I'm sure you'll make a difference in the lives of any aged child that you try to. I really truly hope that this helped you. If you did find this video helpful, I have a ton of YouTube videos all about special education topics. My YouTube handle is ActiviTeach. Go ahead and take your phones out, take a picture or a screenshot of this page so you know how to contact me. You can also find more helpful teaching tips, resources, and ideas on my Facebook page. I have 5 different Facebook groups that you can join. My most popular one is called Special Education Resources with ActiviTeach. I absolutely love this support community because there are over 80,000 people in this group. You can post a question or get advice from thousands of other special education teachers in this group instantly. Another resource for you is my email newsletter. I send a couple of emails each week with special education ideas. I also send free resources every month, and all summer long I send free resources every single week. So if you're going to do anything, make sure you go ahead and join my newsletter here. Go to activiteach.myflowdesk.com/activiteach, or if you go on any of my social media pages, you'll be able to find this link also. If you teach special education math or work readiness, I have a ton of activities and games and worksheets that I've personally created just for special education. You can find all of my resources on my TPT shop, which is called ActiviTeacher. I have a full special education math curriculum on there, and I'm in the process of finishing up a vocational skills work readiness curriculum. My website is activiteach.org, or you can email me anytime. My email is samantha@activiteach.org if you have any questions at all or need any support, go right ahead and email me. I really hope that you learned something today. Again, make sure you go ahead and take a picture of this screen so that you have it for reference for later. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic week. Happy teaching, guys.